Tonight on Bridge City News, Old Man Winter paid us a visit once again as some regions in southwestern Alberta were hit with up to 50 centimeters of snow. The federal Liberals' new Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, made a few stops in Alberta and Saskatchewan, trying to bridge the gap between Ottawa and the prairies. And the Salvation Army has come up with a creative new way for you to donate. We have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. A storm bringing snow and furious winds approached Lethbridge last night as another winter storm warning was issued by Environment Canada. Total snowfall amounts will be from 50 to 40 centimeters, with some areas, including Waterton, possibly exceeding 50. Additionally, winds reduce visibility to near zero. BCN's Loris Alexander was at the Lethbridge Airport and says it was almost business as usual despite threatening weather conditions.
This is Lethbridge's third massive snowstorm for the season, but it has not crippled travel, nor did the city grind to a halt. Here at the Lethbridge Airport, very few canceled flights, with only one delay.
The weather is bad here today, but the airport is operational and the runways are in fairly good condition. The wind is blowing straight across the runway, so it's not sticking to the runway, so it isn't too bad.
Conditions are not too bad. It looks bad in the city and everything else, but we have all of our available equipment out on the runways, and everyone else is able to keep up with the snow as required. And we'll just kind of keep an eye on the changing weather patterns, and the planes are able to come and go as they need to, and we'll just keep on toughing it out.
Only 2 schools were closed today due to weather conditions. One school even making their way to the airport for a field trip.
It's poor visibility out today. It is nerve-wracking being on the roads with a bus of kids. There is snow on the highways. I mean, in town isn't too bad, but out of town in the rural area, it is scary to drive in this kind of weather.
Still a cautionary reminder to monitor alerts and forecasts issued by Environment Canada. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
The Alberta Serious Incident Response Team is investigating the case of a 12-year-old girl being injured by Lethbridge police during an arrest on November 16th. According to a press release, officers were arresting the girl's mother for outstanding warrants, and a physical struggle ensued while they were attempting to take her into custody. Her 12-year-old daughter became involved and received minor injuries. On November 19th, legal counsel representing the 12-year-old reported to police that she had been injured. Police Chief Scott Woods is quoted as saying, "I have complete confidence in the training and professionalism of our officers. Transparency is critical in maintaining public trust, and we welcome the independent investigation by ACERT." Coaldale RCMP have charged a 36-year-old man in connection with a 2-vehicle accident which killed a 66-year-old Colehurst woman on Monday. Wesley Brian Phillips was charged with failing to provide a blood sample along with an impaired driving offense. Phillips' VW Jetta was traveling westbound on Highway 3 when it collided with a Ford Escape near the stop sign on 51st Street in Colehurst. The driver of the Escape died at the scene. The UCP government says it will put a temporary freeze on new photo radar devices. Beginning December 1st, towns and cities will not be able to install new or upgraded photo radar equipment. The freeze will be in place while the province works to define rules for photo radar site selection, operational restrictions, and data collection. A review last year found that photo radar operations only showed a marginal contribution to traffic safety, despite Alberta having the highest number of photo radar devices per capita compared to other provinces. Photo radar across the province generated $220 million in 2016 and 2017. The Business Council of Alberta was giving its input into the Alberta economy today. The group met at the Coast Hotel for a series of meetings and roundtable discussions. The big topics of discussion were how government policies can improve our situation and the current state of Alberta businesses.
Our purpose as an organization is to make life better for Albertans, and we do that through shared prosperity, public policy. We believe that business can be a force for good in the world, and so developing public policy that will enable a broader balance between business and society. We also heard a real rallying call for the business community to come together and have constructive conversations about how do we move forward in the community talking about and whether it's agriculture and energy, whether it's organic and non-organic, whether it's renewable and non-renewable, having a real embracing of that new approach to business and how do we find a common way together.
There was a couple challenges talked about, but primarily today was about what we can do to move forward together, how we can have a strong impact within our own region here and overall within our province. As our slogan is, being the voice of business, the louder we can make that voice, and the more we can make that voice being about Lethbridge with government and industry, the better off Lethbridge will be.
For more information on the Council's research on the Alberta economy, visit their website at businesscouncilab.com. The Transit Union in Lethbridge has thrown its support behind our local school boards, which are impacted by City Council's decision to stop delivery of school bus services after the 2019-2020 school year. Travis Oberg, president of the ATU, says he is shocked Council would make this decision without any public consultation. Oberg said he has 60 drivers whose jobs are on the line, and the union is considering next steps.
We're urging parents in the community to contact City Council to reach out and voice their displeasure with the decision that the city's made. This is, although Council has said they're looking out for the best interest of the taxpayers, this is going to be an increased cost to the taxpayers. If the school boards are unable to put this in-house, there's the opportunity that they may have to tender this out to a private for-profit corporation. And anytime you end up with a private for-profit corporation in the school bus industry, you end up with paying additional service fees to that private for-profit company.
Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman said the city's decision to end its contract with local school boards would have a direct impact on these drivers. Spearman said whatever entity took over the service would most likely need those experienced drivers. The Lethbridge Bulls have a new man in the dugout next season. The ball club announced that Craig Snook, who pitched for the team during the 2014 and 2016 seasons, will become the new head coach. Snook replaces Jesse Sawyer, who was an assistant coach when Snook last wore the Bulls' colors. Snook is currently the third base coach at Arizona Western College and was recently the head coach of the Martinsville Mustangs of the Coastal Plain League last summer. The head coach of the Calgary Flames, Bill Peters, will not be behind the bench tonight as his team takes on the Sabres in Buffalo. The Flames are investigating allegations made by a former player who said Peters made racist comments to him about 10 years ago when both were with the Rockford Ice Hogs of the American Hockey League. Akeem Aliou took to Twitter this week and said Peters did not appreciate his type of music and hurled racist insults at him on a few occasions. Assistant coach Jeff Ward will coach tonight's contest.
You know, I came to the rink yesterday. I was told I was going to run practice. Later on in the day, I was told that I was going to coach the game tonight. So for us as a staff, we're just trying to keep things as normal and as consistent as possible. Everybody's doing the same jobs that they would normally do. Our game day routine is the same in terms of when our meetings are, what the meeting is. We just want to make it as seamless as possible for the players right now.
You know, he said it's basically the same things, like just same systems and stuff so far. So nothing's really changed from that. It's been, a quick turn of events, but it's been pretty much the same. So I don't think there'll be adjustment at all.
The strike at CN Rail may be over, but industry leaders say it will take time before the supply chain gets back on track. CN Rail and the union, representing 3,200 workers, reached a tentative agreement yesterday. That is a week after failed negotiations sent employees to the picket lines. Normal operations resumed earlier today. Todd Lewis, the president of the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan, says the strike contributed to a grain backlog that could take a long time to overcome. Keith Curry, president of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, says the commodities CN chooses to prioritize will determine how quickly farmers get back on their feet. Saskatchewan Premier Doug Moe met with Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland yesterday to discuss the divisions between his province and Ottawa.
There are no commitments made with respect. This was a listening meeting for the Deputy Prime Minister. Understandably, she's been on the job, I believe, for 6 days now. So she, we brought her up to speed from Saskatchewan's perspective, and also, had some good discussion with respect to, what potentially could be possible with each of the items that we talked about. We had some good discussion with respect to this meeting. It took some time to work through some of the, some of the opportunities that may be present, and the Deputy Prime Minister is getting up to speed on a number of these files. She's been in the foreign relations minister post for some time, so she's getting up to speed on some of the files, how where the federal government has been from a stance and where they are today, where the province of Saskatchewan has been. Files like carbon taxation, for example, and what some of the investment that is occurring in our industries, investment that is resulting in real carbon emissions reductions, real sequestration opportunities, and ultimately resulting in some of the cleanest products being supplied around the world.
It appears as though the Trudeau Liberals are trying desperately to bridge the gap between Ottawa and the prairies. New Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland not only met with Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, but she also recently got together with Alberta Premier Jason Kenney at the legislature in Edmonton. One of our political analysts, Brian Lilly, says the Freeland visit didn't result in any solutions, but it was a good first step by the Liberals.
They don't have solutions yet, I'll tell you that much. They were not offering solutions in these meetings this week with the premiers of Alberta and Saskatchewan, with the mayors of Edmonton and Regina, but they are at least listening and reaching out. That's more than they've done in the past at times, so kudos to them for that, and kudos to the premiers who have been at odds with the Trudeau Liberals for taking the time, sitting down, having respectful conversations.
Catch the full interview with Brian Lilly as he also talks about how the U.S. is upset with Canada's defense budget. That's coming up after business news. Arguments wrapped up in a federal court case challenging a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling that ordered Ottawa to pay billions in compensation to First Nations children and their families. Advocates say governments must stop fighting Indigenous children in court and must compensate families for its injustices.
I'm feeling really confident, most of all because I see caring Canadians of all diversities understanding what's happening in this courtroom, which is that Canada is continuing to refuse to accept responsibility for the way it's treating children, and it's refusing to pay the compensation that these children deserve. So with Canadians standing with the children, no matter what happens with this decision, I'm confident that not only will the kids win, but the country will win too. We are working with the Assembly of First Nations on what the process should be for compensation. We are going to make that December 10th deadline to submit our plan to the tribunal. The judge has taken the decision under reserve. I expect he will rule before December 10th, but that really is up to the judge.
Christmas is less than a month away. As you go out shopping, you have no doubt seen the Salvation Army's Christmas kettles. If you don't have any cash on you and you want to donate to the Salvation Army, you can now do so using your smartphone.
The current economics require the fact that we are able to let people know that they can help even if they don't have hard currency on them. They can make a donation electronically.
It was fast. It was very easy. Just took a picture and then it popped up in Safari and I was able to do it right away. I don't carry any cash in the city. I don't think it's a good idea for myself with 2 kids, and so to be able to give online it made it possible.
This can kind of happen magically. People can make the donation without actual money going into the kettle.
Well, I thought it's fantastic. I think it's a real easy way to pay, and it doesn't give people a way to say no that they don't have any cash.
Firefighters are hoping some rainy weather will douse a wildfire burning in the coastal foothills just north of Los Angeles. Around 2,400 homes and other buildings have been threatened near Santa Barbara. The U.S. National Weather Service said a storm is on the way, and they can expect up to 25 millimeters of rain. The rain should help drench the flames. Forecasters said it probably will not fall strongly enough to trigger any major mudslides on the fire-stripped ground. Rescue crews are still searching through the rubble one day after a powerful earthquake rocked Albania. Officials say more than 25 people died and more than 650 were injured when the 6.4 magnitude quake struck the coastal regions. Rescuers continue to search for survivors, including a 4-story villa that housed an extended family. Locals say they believed about 6 people might still be inside the collapsed structure. It was on this day that doctors performed the world's first partial face transplant. San Francisco's mayor was shot to death and playwright Eugene O'Neill dies. This is Today in History for November the 27th.
November 27, 1978. In San Francisco, Mayor George Moscone and City Supervisor Harvey Milk, a gay rights activist, are shot to death at City Hall. Former City Supervisor Dan White, who pulled the trigger, goes on trial for murder, but he's convicted of voluntary manslaughter. In what's dubbed the Twinkie defense, White's attorneys argue their client's junk food habits impaired his judgment. 1973. In Washington, the U.S. Senate confirms Gerald Ford as Richard Nixon's vice president. Ford succeeds Spiro Agnew, who had resigned amid accusations that he took bribes. The following year, Ford becomes president after the Watergate scandal forces Nixon from office. 2005. Doctors in France performed the world's first partial face transplant on a woman disfigured by a dog bite during a 15-hour operation. And 1953. Playwright Eugene O'Neill, who wrote Long Day's Journey into Night and The Iceman Cometh, dies in Boston. He was 65. Today in history, November 27th. Mike Gracia, The Associated Press.
The Northern Ireland office is failing to recognize concerns about freedom of expression regarding the introduction of same-sex marriage. Now, that's according to the Christian Institute. The NIO has warned of possible legal action over the lack of protections for churches and teachers who disagree with same-sex marriage. The Christian Institute's Deputy Director, Kieran Kelly, says a consultation is urgently needed on the matter.
It's not enough for the government to simply talk about having a consultation on religious same-sex marriages sometime in the future. When the law changed in Great Britain, safeguards were introduced in equality law, in public order law. There was guidance to help protect teachers from being required to endorse same-sex marriage. And none of that is going to be in place in Northern Ireland on day one in January when civil same-sex marriages come in, and it needs to be. When Asher's Bakery was dragged through the courts, it wasn't because it was involved in a same-sex religious wedding, it was because it refused to endorse same-sex marriage. And what we need to have here is a guarantee that the protections currently available in GB will be mirrored in Northern Ireland.
Downtown Winnipeg turned into a sea of gold and blue yesterday as the Winnipeg Blue Bombers celebrated their Grey Cup win. About 10,000 screaming fans lined the streets to help the team celebrate their 11th championship in franchise history.
The tremendous amount of gratitude we feel from our fans, from the city, from the province, the support we get, it truly is overwhelming. That feeling of gratitude will never end. And as a community, as a city, you guys have made them feel so welcome. Moving here 6 years ago, we sold everything, we burnt the boats, we showed up here, and it's been fantastic.
We got the best fans in the CFL. It's not even close, man. I love you guys. We love you guys, man. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Thank you guys so much for everything this season, man.
Congratulations again to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. The winter storm warning continues for much of southwestern Alberta. The snow will continue, but for how much longer? Complete weather details are coming up. The winter storm warning continues for our region. So far, some areas have seen 15 to 50 centimeters of the white stuff, with wind gusting up to 60 kilometers an hour. Tonight, more snow developing with a low near minus 12. Tomorrow, good chance of flurries again with a high of minus 10. Friday, the snow should taper off, but the mercury will drop to minus 12. A sunny weekend is shaping up. Blue sky and minus 10 for Saturday, warming up to minus 2 on Sunday. The meltdown should begin on Monday, as we should see a high of 7 degrees. Even warmer, 9 degrees on Tuesday. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 2 degrees, with an average low of minus 10. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1949 at 12 degrees, and the record low, minus 34 in 1985. Sunrise was at 8:01, sunset at 4:37. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across Canada now. Victoria, BC had a wind warning today. Tomorrow the clouds should clear out, mainly sunny and a high of 7. Blue sky and 6 degrees for Vancouver. A good chance of snow and minus 12 is on tap for Calgary on Thursday. Mainly cloudy and minus 10 for Edmonton. Snow and minus 9 for both Regina and Saskatoon. Overcast and minus 8 for Winnipeg. Expect light rain and a high of 3 degrees in Toronto. Rain mixed with snow and 2 degrees for Ottawa tomorrow. Light snow and 3 for Montreal. Over in the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick should receive rain and snow with a high of 2 degrees. Halifax, Nova Scotia should receive showers and 3 degrees. Charlottetown, PEI should receive some rain and 4 degrees. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect drizzle and a high near 4 degrees for tomorrow. Farm groups are happy there's a tentative deal to end the CN Rail strike. The Canadian Federation of Agriculture says it is extremely pleased. President Mary Robinson says farmers rely heavily on rail shipments to get their products to market and to receive farm inputs like fertilizer and propane. A spokesperson with the Manitoba's Keystone Agricultural Producers says the strike was another level of frustration that added to the struggles of farmers who just went through a very long wet harvest. One of the largest shareholders of the Hudson's Bay Company has made a bid for the retailer. Catalyst Capital Group is offering $11 per share. That tops an offer of $10.30 made by an investors group led by HBC executive Richard Baker. Catalyst holds 17.5% stake in HBC and is urging shareholders to vote against the Baker-led bid. Catalyst also filed a complaint with the Ontario Securities Commission asking it to review the actions of the Baker Consortium and HBC. The group says the bid is contrary to public interest. The maker of Ski-Doo snowmobiles and Sea-Doo watercraft says its profit was up 50% from a year ago to just over $135 million. BRP says that amounted to $1.49 per diluted share on revenue of $1.64 billion. That is up from $1.39 billion in the same quarter last year. The company says it now expects full-year revenue to grow 12 to 14%. Analysts were expected 10 to 13%. The Privacy Commissioners of Canada and BC said a Victoria-based firm broke rules for political ads that ran on Facebook, compromising the personal information of millions of Canadians.
We are here this morning to report to you the results of our joint investigation into how Aggregate IQ, a company based in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, collected and used the personal information of voters in a number of jurisdictions, and whether it took the appropriate and necessary steps to protect the personal information of those voters. While some of these campaigns took place in foreign jurisdictions where AIQ may have been subject to those laws, they and every other Canadian company doing work abroad still remain subject to the privacy laws in this country. While we found some of AIQ's services were covered by the consent of individuals, in many other instances, they were not.
Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up almost 65 points on the day to 17,100. The Dow was up 42 points to 28,164. The S&P 500 was up 13 points to 3153. The Nasdaq was up almost 57 points to 8705. Oil was down 27 cents on the day to 58.14 per barrel. Natural gas was down 4 cents to 2.49. Gold was down 10 cents to 14.54.43 an ounce. Silver was down a cent to 16.96 an ounce. Wheat is at $235 per metric ton. Barley's at $237. Coal is at $4.58, and corn is at $274 per metric ton. Live cattle were up $1.03 to $121.85. Feeder cattle were up $1.70 to $143.65. Lean hogs were down 15 cents to $61.26. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to 75.28 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the winter storm warning for southwestern Alberta continues. Environment Canada says Lethbridge has seen up to 25 centimeters of snow so far, with more on the way. Areas including Waterton have seen closer to 50 centimeters. The snow should be tapering off sometime tomorrow night. Premiers from across Canada are meeting in Toronto this weekend. Our political analyst Brian Lilly will explain why next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Come to the Nikayuko Japanese Garden on Friday, November 29th as they kick off the season with their Winter Light Festival, which will run until January 31st. On that evening, the gates will open at 6 p.m. with greetings from sponsors and dignitaries at 7. Admission is $9 for adults, $7 for kids ages 6 to 15, and ticket packages, which include food and drinks, are also available. For more information, visit nikayuko.com. The 15th annual Lethbridge Mayor's Prayer Breakfast is taking place Saturday, November 30th at 9 a.m. at the Sandman Signature Lethbridge Lodge. Put on by the Lethbridge Evangelical Ministerial Association, come join in the gathering to honor and pray for those who have dedicated their lives to the service of our community. Tickets are $20 and can be purchased by calling 403-308-1696 or email mpblethbridge@gmail.com. Aged Care Columbia is pleased to invite you to their Christmas market on Tuesday, December 3rd from 1 to 4 p.m. at 785 Columbia Boulevard West in Lethbridge. Open to the whole family. Find custom-made crafts, clothing, decor, household goods, baking, and more. Also, get a picture with Santa for $1 and enjoy delicious hot chocolate with cookies for $2. Proceeds will go to the Lethbridge Food Bank. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
As you've heard on Bridge City News, a tentative agreement has been reached with the CN Rail strike. Joining me now to talk about it and other big national stories is one of our regular contributors, journalist Brian Lilly. Brian, where does the Prime Minister's office put a little bit of pressure on the union and CN Rail to get a deal done?
It looks like they did. You know, they were under a lot of pressure to call back Parliament last week. And they said, look, this is not our position at this point. I mean, Justin Trudeau, let's be honest, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals have gotten a lot of support from organized labor. They've sought a lot of support. They've given organized labor a lot of things, including legislative and regulatory changes that the unions wanted. So for them to jump on back to work legislation first was going to always be difficult for them. But as we've talked about before, we talked about last week, it'd be difficult. So Parliament was scheduled to come back December 5th. Let's say they brought it up to this past Monday. They have to spend a day or two electing a speaker. Then there's a speech from the throne. That takes a day or two out of the system. This is just what they have to do before they're even allowed to talk legislation because it's a brand new parliament. So what, by Friday, they start talking back to work legislation? Then maybe by the following Friday, by December 6th, it gets passed. Then the next week, no, this is better. They reached an agreement. The workers were back this morning, 6 a.m., trains moving. You know, the workers were looking for better wage conditions. They were looking for, improved working conditions, including time around breaks. Whether it's good enough for what the union wanted, that's between the union and the company. What's good for Canadians is that the trains are going to start moving. So oil can move again. Grain from Western Canada can move again. Propane can move. That was becoming the big thing here in Eastern Canada, was that, a lot of the farmers here, they might be able to get their grain to a port easily, right? There's a lot of ports along the St. Lawrence Seaway that they could get their product to if they were going to ship it outside of Canada. But if they'd just taken their grain off in the last few weeks, their corn especially, it wasn't dried. And the commercial dryers used propane. And across Eastern Canada, in rural parts, there are a lot of people that heat their homes with propane. Some areas were down to a one-day supply. So all in all, Hal, this is good news. And if the Prime Minister's office was helpful on this, kudos to them. I talked to them on the weekend. They said this was always their strategy. Apply pressure, use a mediator. Back to work legislation was a last resort in part because of how long it would take.
Brian, the Liberals' new Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who's originally from Peace River, Alberta, recently met with Alberta Premier Jason Kenney. She also met with Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe and our country's new Natural Resources Minister, Seamus O'Regan, was in Alberta recently. Now, Brian, with all of this attention the federal Liberals are paying to the prairies, will this help bridge the gap a little bit, especially when it comes to national unity?
We're going to have to wait and see on this because it determines or it'll be determined by what's delivered as opposed to, how things appear. Is it style or is it substance? If it's both, great. But what the Premier's offices in the prairies are telling me is they want substance. Speaking especially with people in Jason Kenney's office, and they were telling me, okay, we're not ready to say things are great yet, but it is a new tone. That's similar to what I heard, and we can talk about that in a minute, from Ontario Premier Doug Ford. They heard a different tone from Chrystia Freeland. They heard a lot of listening and a lot of understanding, as opposed to, well, hit the road. We don't care what you think. The Liberals are really trying to show that they know there's a problem, that they care, that they understand, that they're trying to do something about it. They don't have solutions yet, I'll tell you that much. They were not offering solutions in these meetings this week with the premiers of Alberta and Saskatchewan, with the mayors of Edmonton and Regina, but they are at least listening and reaching out. That's more than they've done in the past at times. So kudos to them for that, and kudos to the premiers who have been at odds with the Trudeau Liberals for taking the time, sitting down, having respectful conversations.
Now, Brian, speaking of the premiers, they're joining from across Canada. They'll be meeting in Toronto this weekend. But Brian, before we discuss that, Ontario Premier Doug Ford met with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And you can say all sides have turned over a bit of a new leaf?
Yeah. And I'm believing that, Hal. I spoke to both sides. I spoke mostly to the Premier's office going in, being down here in Toronto, being steps from Queen's Park. I was talking to them saying, okay, how are things going? They said, well, they're very accommodating. They're very respectful. It's a very different tone. That was all ahead of the meeting. I said, yeah, but, well, we'll wait and see. I was more skeptical than they were. I said, well, wait and see. You tell me what it's like behind closed doors. And, was Justin Trudeau going to be very nice while the cameras are on and then the doors close? And he says, all right, my way or the highway. And both Premier Ford's office and the Prime Minister's office spoke to both of them in the days after the meeting, and they said, no, it was all good. They had been hitting each other hammer and tong. You know that. Premier Ford stopped doing that back around late July, early August, but Trudeau all through the campaign, whack-a-mole, whack-a-mole, whack-a-mole with Doug Ford. So this was a big surprise. He didn't go as hard against Jason Kenney and Scott Moe. This was the big test, and they both passed. Now that bodes well for those meetings we were just discussing between Chrystia Freeland and Jason Kenney, Chrystia Freeland and Scott Moe. If they are really turning over a new leaf and realizing that the election result was not a resounding endorsement of their first 4 years in office, that there was a repudiation there, that there are problems, then maybe real progress can be made on some of the issues that the Western premiers have. But yeah, that will be a big focus of the meeting coming up. I guess it starts this weekend and into Monday in Toronto.
Yeah, that's right. It starts on Sunday, followed by the big meeting addressing national unity coming up on Monday. Now, Brian, it appears as though Conservative Party leader Andrew Scheer is facing more pressures about his leadership. I saw in a recent interview that our former boss, Corey Tanaik, from the now defunct Sun News Network, wants to see Scheer gone.
Yeah, and that's something he told me last week, and I wrote about it on the weekend. And then, as my friend likes to say, you can follow B-Lil now or catch up next week. And so all the other media outlets are following up. And so you've got articles about the social conservatives want him out. You've got stories saying Corey tonight. Corey told me that Scheer is not cut out for this job. And the quote that I used was that nobody wants to resign, but most people eventually do the right thing and resign. He's one of the people that want Scheer gone ahead of the convention. But that's one group, Hal, one group of many. Social conservatives are organizing because they say Scheer was not strident enough on social issues like abortion and gay marriage, which some people say, he was too far on the other side. So they're organizing to make sure they get their delegates to the convention to vote against Scheer. Some of the social conservative groups, people like Campaign Life Coalition, others say, look, we have to deal with incrementalism. We can't have it all or now. And Andrew Scheer was doing their best. So there's a split on the social conservative side. You've got red Tories out of Alberta that are organizing to raise money to send delegates or pay for their delegates to go to the convention because it can be expensive, $3,000 to $5,000. They're going to be raising money so that if you're a delegate, Hal, and you want to go and vote against Scheer, but you don't have the cash, don't worry about it. That has to be worrisome for Scheer. And that's part of why he's doing this listening tour he's got going on across the country, although, is that enough? Was firing his director of communications and his chief of staff enough? All of it might be too little too late. We're going to have to wait and see.
Brian, south of the border, the White House is not happy with Canada's defense budget. A letter was apparently sent from the U.S. government to Ottawa calling for an increase in defense spending. Why should they tell us how much we should be spending here?
Well, they can because we're a member of NATO. And being a member of NATO, we've agreed to spend 2% of our GDP on defense. And the last time we did that, Pierre Trudeau was prime minister, and I think Jimmy Carter was president. And, it's been going down since the early Trudeau years. It was up during the 1960s. It was in that range all through the Cold War era up until the late 1960s, early 1970s, started to go down. We hit, I think, just under 2% around 1980 was the last time. I haven't looked at the exact numbers. But the Americans say, you are a member of this group. You're supposed to be spending more than double what you are. Here's the reality. The electoral math in Canada does not favor defense spending. When Stephen Harper first won power, new Conservative government, first one since Mulroney and I guess a little bit of Campbell in 93, Stephen Harper promised to increase defense spending. And there was support for that among the Conservative base, but there wasn't support among the general public. So he bought us the new heavy lift planes that we needed for Afghanistan. He made sure that the Army members that were going into Afghanistan had proper combat gear and they were going in desert fatigues, not greens, for goodness sakes. You can't go in green camo into a desert situation. So he made sure he outfitted them. And there was some support for that, but it quickly faded. And among the general public, there's no support for military spending. They simply do not care. And so eventually Stephen Harper said, if it's not going to help me, if it's actually going to hurt me and give me more headaches, why am I going to bother? And that was his attitude. And Justin Trudeau is much the same. So there's no incentive for any Canadian Prime Minister to do it, even though on paper we've committed to it. And every American president has raised this issue. Barack Obama raised it when speaking in Parliament, for goodness sakes.
Brian, it's been almost a year since 2 Canadians were detained by China on trumped-up charges after Huawei's CEO Wang Zhou was arrested. Now, Brian, has there been any movement on the release of the 2 Michaels, Spavor and Kovrig?
No, not that we've seen, not in public. There was thankfully a meeting between our new Foreign Affairs Minister, Francois-Philippe Champagne, and his Chinese counterpart. That's good news. Mr. Champagne says this is a priority for him. That's a bit stronger language than I remember hearing from the previous government, or the previous minister. Not that Chrystia Freeland downplayed it, but he's really saying this is an issue for me. It didn't seem as important. I'm not saying that she was leaving them to rot, but it didn't seem as important. He seems to be putting it at the fore. So good for him. Is he going to get them released? It's tough to get them released without caving into what China wants, which is that we politically interfere in our judicial system, release Meng Wanzhou, and allow her to go free, despite the fact that we have an extradition treaty with the United States, despite the fact that they've presented enough evidence in court so far to keep her, she's not locked up. She's living in her mansion in Vancouver. So, there's a very big downside for us doing that. We basically will have to release her and allow Huawei, main sponsor of Hockey Night in Canada, to be a member of the organization that builds our new 5G network. There's a lot of security implications on that I'm not sure a lot of Canadians are ready to buy into, including the government.
École Polytechnique survivors have called on Ottawa to ban what they call assault weapons and a ban on future import of handguns. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, the Liberals didn't say that they would ban handguns in the last election, but they did say they would ban military-style assault weapons. Well, there's no definition of that, and it's been difficult to try and get a definition. The example that they kept using was the AR-15. That's one of the most popular, target shooting rifles in North America, in the world even. And while it has been used in a number of mass shootings in the United States, it has no history of crime in Canada. I was speaking with a fellow earlier today, actually, about this, and said, I can still only find one concrete example, but a former police officer tells me there was a second in the 80s. So this rifle's been in Canada since it was first released in the 1960s, and the entire gun community, including law enforcement officers, can only think of 2 examples where it's been used. And the Liberals have said that they will spend $600 million, so, round it up to $1 billion, because governments always go over, to buy back rifles that have no history of crime. People are not stealing your rifle or my rifle or anybody else's rifle, Hal, and going out and committing crimes. What they're using predominantly are imported handguns smuggled in from the United States. They're smuggled across the border. They're smuggled in at Buffalo. They're smuggled in at Niagara Falls. They're smuggled in at the reserve at Akwesasne. They're smuggled in at the border near Vancouver. All of these places. And then they're sold on the black market for high prices. This is not an issue of going after licensed law-abiding gun owners. It's going after the smugglers, and it's going after the gang members that use them. But that's hard work, and it's easier to go to the guys who have registered these guns, because they are registered, and say, hand those over, because we want to deal with the shootings happening in Toronto and Surrey, British Columbia.
Brian, we just had the 107th Grey Cup in Calgary. Sadly, your Ticats lost to the Bombers 33-12. But now, thanks to the Bombers winning the championship, one guy can finally put on his pants for the first time in, 18 years?
Yeah, Chris Matthew. Can you imagine being married to this guy and he hasn't worn pants since 2001? Oh, my goodness. Yeah, we're going out for a nice dinner. Yeah, I got my cargo shorts on again. The bigger story, though, Hal, is that Ontario might lose a large chunk of its territory to Manitoba, because Premier Brian Pallister of Manitoba put out a video on Twitter challenging Ontario Premier Doug Ford to a bet and said, I'll wear the Ticats jersey into the question period if those Tabbies win. But since they're the odds-on favorite, you have to win a Bombers jersey into your question period if the Bombers win, and hand over all the territory west of Thunder Bay. And Doug Ford just agreed to it on Twitter and didn't put a caveat in. So I talked to Premier Pallister the other day. He said he'll be bringing up this issue. He wants to get it moving as fast as possible. He'll bring it up at the meeting of the premiers with Premier Ford, says we can work out the details in a bilateral, and let's get that land moved over to Manitoba.
Good luck with that. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me from Toronto. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
It may seem early to be talking about Christmas, but the day is fast approaching. I know because my kids have me counting down the days. So we're privileged today to be joined by Brian Dirksen. He is a father of 6, a pastor, a songwriter, an award-winning recording artist. I think most of you know who he is. And he's about to release a Christmas album called The Heart of Christmas. So welcome, Brian. So good to have you on with us today.
So good to be here.
Well, you've been at this for, I think, 30-some years. Tell us about your new album. I did listen to it, loved it.
Well, it was a long time in coming. You know, the record label has been pestering me for like 15 years. Brian, when are you going to do a Christmas album? And my response was, when I have something to say. You know, there's a lot of Christmas music out there, and it seems like a lot of people recording the same songs over and over again. And I'm a songwriter, so I wanted to wait until I had a body of work that told the Christmas story from my perspective. So, you know, and about 2 years ago, my wife, it was in the middle of summer, the heat of summer, and she looked at me and said, "It's time." And she went upstairs, got a box of decorations, came into my office, set up Christmas decorations, you know, the peace on earth sign and Christ and all of this. And I'm like, okay. And she looks at me, get to work. So away I went, started writing new Christmas songs.
Oh, that is really interesting. Yeah, you could tell, you know, having listened to the album, had the opportunity to do that, and yeah, you could tell there's a songwriter at work here, some deep lyrics there, which I really appreciate. Like you say, I mean, it's fun to have, you know, the Jingle Bell songs, whatever, they're okay, I guess, but this is about Jesus. It's his day, right? So what do you feel is the heart of Christmas?
Well, obviously the story of Jesus and his birth, and the invitation that brings to all of us to receive love, to give love, to walk with those who need love. And for me, the heart of Christmas is this Emmanuel, God with us, but that he's with all of us, those that are in need, those of us in all parts of culture, you know, that we need that message. And I think Jesus is that presence in our life. And that, to me, is the heart of Christmas.
Well said. Any thoughts on how to keep Christ at the center of it all? You know, I mean, once this kicks into full gear, I mean, it's such a busy time of the year. I have trouble myself, you know, just getting off focus, and you got to, you know, rein yourself back in, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting thing is like when, and I have 2 special needs boys, and for one of them in particular, who's not very verbal, but his birthday's a big deal, okay? So getting ready for somebody's birthday is a big deal. And one of the things I did with our children is, you know, this is the birth of Christ. It's like celebrating a birthday. So yeah, we do have to get some preparations, you know, we decorate, we do that. But the point of it isn't all of what we're doing, is to honor that person, so I think, you know, yes, there's preparations, but it's keeping the focus on Christ, keeping the focus on welcoming him and honoring him. And we also do that by the way we love each other, right? Even, you know, even giving a gift to somebody else can be a way of honoring Christ, because we are recognizing who that person is and we're loving them and acknowledging that we know them, right? But it is tricky. There's no perfect way of doing it.
I mean, I think we sometimes just need to simply, I guess, you know, state the obvious in that sense, even around a, you know, supper table with the family. Do you ever do that? You know, you sit down with the kids and say, you know, what do you think? What is Christmas about? And you actually talk it through to, you know, audibly remind each other what it's about.
Yeah, and we did that a lot, and when the kids were younger, we would be constantly retelling the Christmas story, you know, and then get the kids involved in telling the Christmas story. And really all for me, my album, The Heart of Christmas, is now a chance for me to tell that story in song.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and it is well done. Again, the album, The Heart of Christmas, I encourage people to check it out. What are some of your favorite Christmas memories looking back over your life?
Well, for me, the Christmas tree, the setting up of the Christmas tree, and then putting on vinyl records. I'm a vinyl record guy. Hey, look, we actually made this.
I
as
remember
a
that
vinyl
too.
record.
Oh yeah, that's great.
But I would put on some of the classic vinyl records, and I would turn off all the lights, and I would look at the Christmas tree, and I would listen to the Christmas songs. And I was always kind of like that. I wanted, even as a child, I knew this was celebrating the birth of Christ, and so I knew, I would, you have songs like Silver Bells, Silver Bells, it's Christmas time in the city. But I could do that for a song or two, but then I wanted to get back to Jesus, right? Like, okay, what is this about? And, so definitely my favorite Christmas memories are in the dark, but with the lights on the tree. And that whole process of the days before Christmas, of just really entering into the spirit of it. And it's funny because in some ways now I go, oh, that really connects with what I do now. And I was in essence doing that as a boy. I was just tuned into that. Yeah, and then there's certain, dishes that my mom would make, certain food things that would happen only at Christmas. This type of sausage roll that we would have every Christmas Eve, and so it's a combination of music, visual, food, and really worshiping Christ together as a family and as a community of faith.
Yeah, it stirs up warm feelings in that sense, doesn't it? However, as you point out, actually in your album, another aspect of Christmas is the fact that for many it can be a very lonely time of the year. You speak of dark, and there's the Christmas, tree with the lights on it. Especially for those who have lost a loved one, and your album has a song called Saddest Season. Tell us about that a bit.
Well, just over 6 years ago, my mom passed away, and my mom was kind of like, in some ways, the beating heart of Christmas, because she was the one preparing the food, really being very present for all of us, her children, her grandchildren. And that was such a hard Christmas. And I remember we somehow managed to get through Christmas Day, and it was the end of the day. We cleaned up the dishes, and I walked over to the piano, and my hands fell on this G major 7 kind of wistful chord, and this song just tumbled out of me. Christmas is the saddest season. Close friends and families gather and try not to mourn the missing. And this feeling of like how when you love deeply, when you lose, like this holiday of Christmas gets, like, to quote a friend of mine, Carly Rearson, it's stained with grief. Like, it's still the same thing, but there's now a stain on it of grief, like it impacts. And I think, we have of the faith persuasion, we believe in the death and the resurrection of Christ, and we believe ultimately in our resurrection. So we have hope, but that does not mitigate or lessen that feeling of grief in that season in any way. In some ways it heightens it, because we feel like we're now separated from that loved one, right? They may be on the other side, but we can't experience their love or their care. So I wrote that song and then just kind of set it aside. And my wife was like, Joyce was like, you have to include this on the album because there's a lot of people who can relate to it.
A lot of people need to hear that song. Like I said, it kind of goes hand in hand. It's that double-edged sword. There's always that tension between the joy and the grief. Yeah, I lost my mom about a year ago, and it's very different Christmas.
And it's almost like for people who've lost loved ones, Christmas is the hardest of all, because it's the most close time of all. So then it becomes the hardest.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. What about the commercialization of Christmas? I mean, do we spend way too much on gifts? Big picture compared to so many developing countries. Yeah, we do. Is there a different or a better way to do things? Any thoughts on that briefly?
Well, I mean, I think we've always tried to both know and love and gift according to who the person is, but always do things every year that are about justice and the poor, and do both. Like sometimes I think some people say, no, we shouldn't give each other gifts at all. We should just, and I think, well, see, the thing is, sometimes when we talk about loving God, we have to remember that the first way we express our love for God is loving those that are right around us, loving our neighbor as ourselves. And who's our closest neighbor but our family, really, truly. So let's love them well, but let's not forget the poor, as it says in the gospel. Let's find ways to give. I mean, the crazy thing is, of course, my wife and I are trying to be givers all year. We give to church and to charities and to ministries all year long. So it's not like Christmas we have to try and catch up. But we do need to do something. And it's a tension. You described it well. There is no way of getting out of that tension between commercialization and the meaning of it, Christmas. And we just try and walk through that with grace.
Well, again, the heart of Christmas, the name of your album, it is about Jesus, and you're passionate about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Can you share a little bit of your experience with music? I mean, can music touch people's lives to the extent of actually bringing them into a relationship with their creator? So people put on, a vinyl album or a CD, or they listen to an MP3. Can it actually be that powerful, you think?
Absolutely, and I've had so many letters and stories over the years. I have songs like a song like Creation Calls, which is about the beauty of creation, and the chorus, it goes, how can I say there is no God when all around creation calls? And I remember back in the day when I went to take my special needs son for an award to the video store to sign out a DVD. And I present my video store card to the video store clerk, and she looks up at me and goes, that's so weird. And I go, what's weird? She goes, well, you've got the same name as this kind of name I can't pronounce, but he's a music guy, and he's got a song on YouTube. It's all about the beauty of creation, and when I watch it, I weep, and I'm not a person of faith, but I'm being drawn, and that's so weird that you have the same name as that guy. And I'm like, I'm that guy.
That's great.
I'm that guy. That was me singing that song, and she gets all wide-eyed. And it was just beautiful to hear her story without any, just the trigger of the name, that she was being drawn just through the power of a song and something in the song that she could relate to. So music is a way to the heart, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a conduit for the Spirit of God to reach through and touch people. Everybody loves music. Now, and there's so many people, going through difficult times. And a number of years ago, you went through a winter season, darkness, some struggles. You say you almost lost faith in God. So you can relate to people struggling with this as well, right? So, I mean, there's people watching right now who may be going through a very similar season. What advice would you have for them?
Spring will return. Sometimes winter is very long, and I'm speaking metaphorically now, in our souls. But I think I have a song from an old project called Will You Love Me in the Winter, which is about this heart cry, I think, in the heart of every human being, is when I can't produce, when I can't generate anything, am I still worthy of being loved? And having, for me, special needs sons has really illustrated that. They can't produce according to the world, but I love them so completely. So my just gentle advice to anybody who's going through that is trust deeply that you are loved, and let the love bring back that spring, that new life, that in time it will come. For me, it took some time, but it will come, and and then I think music can help with that. I think other people of faith, surrounding yourself with other people who are good at that, have faith in God, but also are good at loving and listening to you, and be patient.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, we need people around us, people of faith around us. You mentioned how important, of course, your wife was to you in supporting you during this very difficult time. Yeah, absolutely key. And then again, music can help us so much. Tell us about your upcoming concert tour, speaking of music. I see you're going to be coming to Southern Alberta, concert in Medicine Hat. I believe it's December 12th, and then Tabor, December 13th. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, we're really excited. It's a partnership with a fellow named Tim Neufeld from Tim and the Glory Boys and myself and my band, and we're doing Heart of Christmas, Sharing the Heart, sharing the songs. We'll sing a few of my kind of classic worship songs that people know and love, and it's my full band. And we're going to go throughout Alberta and share the story in the Heart of Christmas, and we're pumped. We're coming to Southern Alberta.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, I'm going to try to get out to this one in Tabor, hopefully. Well, I guess it's longer to drive Medicine Hat, but Medicine Hat's a great place too. So where can people buy tickets for this concert tour, and where can they actually buy the Heart of Christmas album?
Well, if they go to just briandirksen.com, if you click on the events link, then it drops down a menu, and all of the events in Alberta are listed, and you can go right through there, buy tickets. And if you're briandirksen.com, if you click on the shop link, you can get CDs, vinyl records, you can even buy a digital download, and you can support artists like me and others instead of supporting mega corporations like Apple by buying it straight from us. It helps us pay for our production costs. And my wife and I would love to ship you a CD or a vinyl record right to your door. So, yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay, briandirksen.com. Hey, appreciate the time, Brian, today for sharing with us here, and just appreciate your heart for communicating the heart of Christ. Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, that's great, isn't it? Brian Dirksen, award-winning recording artist. Do check out the album Heart of Christmas, briandirksen.com. On behalf of all of us at Bridge City News, thank you so much for watching.